Ableton version 11.1 is optimized for M1 Pro, M1 Max, and the regular M1. The difference between running Ableton in Rosetta, which is a translator for the old Intel architecture, and running it on the M1 on the new MacBook Pros, it runs a lot faster and a lot more efficiently on 11.1 beta since it's M1 native. So I have been real careful this year about buying plugins because I'm waiting for plugins to go native before I buy new plugins. Because there's a lot of companies that aren't supporting M1 natively yet. Let me actually show you guys some of the plugins that I use that are M1 native. One thing to note, M1 native plugins will work in VST and VST3 format. Anything that is not M1 native will still open up as an audio unit, but it won't get the benefit of being faster load time, more CPU efficiency. But you can still run AU plugins if they're not M1 native. But I'm trying to collect M1 native plugins so it just runs super efficiently. So these are the plugins I use right now that are M1 native. Sketch Cassette 2, I've been using this plugin for a couple of years now. When I heard that they were M1 native, I was super excited. Sketch Cassette 2 runs incredibly. This is new. All of the Arturia plugins and V Collection 8 are now M1 native. You can run Analog Labs, the DX7, the Mini V3, OBXA, all completely M1 native now. I was waiting a minute to install the Arturia plugins because I just wanted everything to run super efficiently, but it's all M1 native now. So shout out to Arturia for doing that update. Blue Cat Patchwork is M1 native. It's dope if you want to just quickly load in a plugin. You can load in multiple plugins in one chain. So Blue Cat Patchwork is M1 native. Memory Mode, completely M1 native. This is a dope synth. Super recommended. It's a great sounding software analog synth. All of the FabFilter stuff is M1 native. Pro DS, awesome DSer plugin. Pro L2, M1 native. Pro MB, you see how fast these are loading right now? Pro Q3, oh yeah, there it is, it loaded so fast. Saturn 2, all completely M1 native. Shout out to FabFilter. All their plugins are M1, those are the ones that I personally own. Scalar 2, M1 native. Amazing plugin for coming up with scales, like if you're in a beat block or you don't know much music theory. This is amazing for coming up with new progressions, scales, all that kind of stuff. Of course, Knock, my plugin, is completely M1 native. In the very first version we released, I wanted to make sure that it'll run on the new Macs. So it's 100% M1 native, and you can also use it in Rosetta, whatever. I just installed this one last night. Refx Nexus 3, completely M1 native. I think they just released it as M1 native. And they also just released Nexus 4, which I don't think I really need to upgrade to. I'm cool with 3. Thank you, Lord. Sound Theory Gullfoss. Completely M1 native. This plugin is something that I use all the time. I have it permanently sitting on my master. I have the live version because of latency. Gullfoss, it just adds that extra 5 to 10 to 15% on your master. Just cleans up your mix. Highly recommended. Completely M1 native. The other version didn't work in the beta, so shout out to Sound Theory for being on point. Spectrasonic's Keyscape. Not only is it M1 native, but it runs way better now. On my other Mac, it just wasn't running that smoothly. Either Keyscape or Omnisphere, but now that it's on M1 and it's native, it runs super smooth. Shout out to Spectrasonics. Omnisphere also runs really smooth, much better than on my 2019, and it's M1 native. And Spectrasonics Trilian. Love this plugin, always loved it since it came out, since it was called Trilogy. M1 native, runs smooth, amazing, bass plugin. It has synth bass and live basses, really dope. I highly recommend this one. This is a free plugin. Spitfire Labs, M1 native. You can download a bunch of free sound libraries for it. It has piano, keys, flute, drums, synth, guitar, acoustic, electric, strings, violin, cello, anything you want, and it's free. M1 native. Another one, Diva. Completely M1 native, runs amazingly. So smooth now that it's on the M1 native. Love it. You guys know what it is. This is one of the top analog style software synths. Valhalla Vintage Verb, M1 native. Great reverb. This is a great one, but since Ableton released their new convolution reverb, I haven't been using this as much, but it's still amazing, especially if you're not working in Ableton all the time. If you do some stuff in FL or in Pro Tools, Valhalla Vintage Verb, it's a must cop. XLN Audio Addictive Drums 2, M1 native. Shout out to XLN Audio. Addictive Keys by XLN Audio. They recently did this update. M1 native. I love Addictive Keys because it's a super fast go-to plugin. Like if you want to load up some keys, it's really quick to load, especially when Keyscape used to take a while on my old Mac. Addictive Keys is another go-to. RC20, it's M1 native now. Shout out to XLN Audio. Sugar Bytes Effectrix. This is an oldie, but super dope plugin, M1 native. Cable Guys Halftime, M1 native. Cop this if you don't already have it, it's 13 bucks. Shout out to Cable Guys. Baby Audio's plugins are M1 native too. I need to install all the Baby Audio plugins, so that's coming next. Those are the plugins I use that are M1 native. Am I missing any plugins that are M1 native? I own a ton of plugins. This is what I've installed so far.